The afternoon sun fell gently on the small village road, turning the dust into golden mist. Sam sat quietly by the riverbank, her thin hands washing a basket of vegetables, her reflection trembling in the water. She was still the same girl everyone called the beggar girl, simple, quiet, and unseen by most of the world. But to one man, she was different. That man was Officer Ly. For months, he had been visiting the small village on official duty, investigating a cross-border trafficking case. But between the files, the reports, and the danger, there was always a moment when his eyes sought her. The girl who offered him water under the shade of a banana tree when he was exhausted one afternoon. Since that day, something gentle had begun to grow in his heart. That evening, as the crimson sky faded into a deep violet, Ly walked slowly toward her hut. He carried no uniform, no badge, only a single bouquet of wild daisies, freshly picked along the roadside. Sam looked up in surprise when he called her name. "Sam," he said softly, his voice trembling slightly. "Tomorrow, I have to leave for Cambodia. The mission may take a long time, and it might be dangerous." Sam froze, her heart skipped a beat. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked quietly, though her voice betrayed fear. Ly took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving hers. "Because before I go, I need to tell you something I've been hiding for too long. Sam, The wind blew softly, carrying the scent of the river and the whisper of something tender yet painful. "I love you." Sam's hands trembled. She didn't know how to respond. A police officer, confessing his love to a girl like her. It sounded like a cruel dream, one that might vanish when morning came. Ly smiled faintly, as if understanding her silence. "You don't need to say anything," he said. "Just promise me that you'll take care of yourself while I'm gone." The dusk wrapped around them like a secret, the world suddenly too small for all the emotions that filled it. Sam looked at him, her eyes glistening. She wanted to tell him to stay, but her lips could only whisper, "Please, come back safely." Ly nodded, his gaze soft but resolute. "I will," he said. "No matter what happens, I'll come back to you." And when he turned away, walking into the falling darkness, Sam's heart tightened. She watched until his shadow disappeared down the road, carrying her unspoken love, and his dangerous promise, into the unknown. The next morning, the sky over Phnom Penh was heavy with rain. The city buzzed with chaos, a mixture of street vendors shouting, tuk-tuks honking, and soldiers standing guard at checkpoints. Officer Ly stepped out of the car, his uniform soaked, his eyes sharp beneath his calm expression. This mission was unlike any before. He was here to dismantle a dangerous human trafficking ring that crossed borders from Vietnam into Cambodia, the same network that once threatened the life of a girl he had rescued months ago. The same girl who had changed him to Sam. Every step Ly took now carried the weight of her voice in his heart. "Please, come back safely." The investigation dragged on for weeks. Days turned into nights filled with tension and gunfire. Ly worked undercover, pretending to be a buyer to gain the trust of the criminals. He slept little, ate almost nothing, and sent no messages home, not even to Sam. He knew she would be waiting, but any communication could risk everything. One night, after days of surveillance, Ly and his small team prepared for the raid. The warehouse loomed dark in the rain, faint sounds echoing inside the cries of captives, the laughter of their captors. Ly's heart pounded. He whispered into his radio, "Move in, quietly." The moment they broke through the door, chaos exploded. Gunfire cracked through the night. Ly ducked behind crates, returning fire. The air filled with smoke and the sound of shouting in mixed languages. He spotted the leader, a tall man with a scar across his face, running toward the back exit. Ly chased him, his boots slipping on the wet floor. "Stop," he shouted, but the man turned and fired. Pain tore through Ly's shoulder as a bullet grazed him, yet he kept running. He couldn't let him escape, not when so many lives depended on this. Finally, with one final push, Ly tackled the man to the ground. The criminal's weapon skidded across the floor. Ly handcuffed him, his breath ragged, blood mixing with the rainwater around him. The operation was over. The victims were rescued. But Ly, barely conscious, looked up at the dark sky and whispered one name, Sam, before collapsing. Back in the village, at that very moment, Sam stood by the window of her small house. The rain fell heavily, and the sound reminded her of the night Ly had left. She didn't know where he was, or if he was safe. All she could do was press her hands together and pray silently. When Ly opened his eyes, the world was blurry, a haze of white lights and muffled voices. The sterile scent of medicine filled the air. His body felt heavy, his shoulder wrapped in thick bandages. For a moment, he didn't remember where he was. Then the memory came crashing back. The warehouse, the rain, the gunfire. Where am I? He whispered weakly. A nurse turned, surprised. You're in a military hospital in Phnom Penh, sir. You were injured during the operation. You've been unconscious for 2 days. 2 days! The realization hit him like a wave. He had survived, but the first thought that followed wasn't about his wound, it was to Sam. He tried to reach for his phone, but it had been confiscated during the mission. His superior entered the room, a stern man in his 50s, eyes filled with both pride and concern. Ly, the man said quietly, you did well. The operation was a success. The victims are safe. You brought down one of the largest trafficking networks in the region. Ly tried to sit up despite the pain. Sir, I need to contact someone. Just one message. His superior shook his head. Not yet. The mission isn't fully over. There are still people out there. If they trace your call, they'll know you're alive, and they might target her to Sam. The name hung unspoken between them, but Ly's heart clenched. He nodded slowly. Understood, sir. When the officer left, Ly lay back, staring at the ceiling. He could still hear Sam's soft voice echoing in his mind. I'll wait for you. No matter how long it takes. He smiled faintly, his eyes glistening. Please, don't stop waiting yet. Days passed. His wound began to heal, but the danger outside grew. The remaining members of the trafficking group had discovered their leader was captured, and they wanted revenge. One night, a warning reached the hospital. There was a planned attack to silence Ly before he could testify. The command came swiftly. Evacuate immediately. Ly was escorted to a military convoy heading for the border. The rain poured again, relentless, cold, and unforgiving. As the jeep sped through the muddy roads, Ly held on to the single thought that kept him alive. He would see Sam again. But fate had other plans. As they neared the border, an explosion shattered the silence. The vehicle swerved violently and flipped into a ditch. Screams filled the night. Ly's vision blurred as smoke and fire surrounded him. He crawled out, gasping, his uniform torn and bloodied. Is anyone alive? He shouted, his voice breaking. No response. Then gunfire. The enemy was near. Ly grabbed a fallen soldier's weapon, hiding behind a tree. His heart pounded, his shoulder burned. But he fought back with every ounce of strength he had left. He had no backup, no signal, no hope, except for one promise. I'll return to you, Sam. Back in Vietnam, Sam was standing at the market, selling eggs from her hens. The winter wind bit into her skin, but she didn't care. Every day, she watched the road leading into town, hoping to see that familiar figure appear. Yet days turned to weeks, and no letter, no call came. Rumors reached the border. An officer had gone missing during a raid in Cambodia. When Sam heard the news, the basket in her hands fell to the ground. Her world turned silent. No, she whispered, trembling. No, he promised me. He said he would come back. But as the cold wind carried away her voice, somewhere deep in the jungle, a bloodied man was still crawling through the mud, refusing to give up, refusing to die. For her, the night in Cambodia was merciless. Thick fog cloaked the jungle, and the moon hid behind heavy clouds. Ly dragged himself across the damp earth, his uniform torn, blood soaking through the fabric on his arm and side. Every step sent pain shooting through his body, But he didn't stop. He couldn't. The explosion had wiped out his convoy. He was the only one left alive. His radio was shattered, his compass gone. All he had was a photo, a small worn picture of Tu Sam, her gentle smile frozen in time. He pressed it against his chest, whispering into the dark, "Sam, wait for me. Just a little longer." Days turned into nights. He survived on rainwater and wild fruit, his mind flickering between consciousness and delirium. Sometimes, he saw Sam walking toward him in his dreams, her voice echoing softly, "Don't give up, Lee. You promised me you'd come back." Meanwhile, in the small village back home, Tu Sam sat by the window, staring at the candle that burned low. The wind howled outside, and tears silently fell down her cheeks. Every morning she asked the postman the same question, "Any news from Cambodia?" Every time, he gave her the same answer, "Not yet." Her heart refused to believe he was gone. She had seen the way his eyes looked at her before he left, full of promises, full of love. That kind of gaze doesn't just disappear. One afternoon, as she was feeding her chickens, a man in a dark green uniform arrived at her gate. Her heart skipped. For a moment, she thought it was him, but it wasn't. The officer removed his hat, bowing his head. "Miss Tu Sam, I'm from the ministry. I came regarding Officer Lee." Her hands trembled. "What happened to him?" "He went missing after an ambush near the border. We're still searching. There's a chance he might still be alive." Those words, a chance, lit a fire inside her chest. That night, Sam packed a small bag with essentials and an old map. She knew what everyone would say, that it was madness, that a woman like her shouldn't go alone. But she didn't care. "I owe him my life," she whispered, tying her scarf. "If he's still out there, I have to find him." Before dawn, she set off toward the border, her footsteps light but determined. The journey was long and dangerous, narrow paths, unfamiliar language, endless rain. She crossed rivers, begged for rides, slept in roadside shelters. Each night, she whispered his name like a prayer. "Lee, please hold on." Back in the jungle, Lee was collapsing under a tree, his body weak, vision fading. The rain fell harder, washing the mud from his face. He looked up toward the sky, his lips trembling. "If this is where it ends," he whispered, "at least let me see her face. One more time." And then faintly, through the mist, he heard a voice calling his name. "Lee, Lee, is that you?" His eyes widened. He thought it was a dream, another cruel trick of his fading mind. But then he saw her, Tu Sam, soaked from the rain, running toward him, tears streaming down her face. He tried to speak, but no sound came. She knelt beside him, holding his trembling hands. "I found you. I finally found you." The rain kept falling, but neither of them cared. For the first time in weeks, Lee felt warmth, not from the weather, but from the touch of the woman who had refused to give up on him. He closed his eyes, whispering, "Sam, you came." She smiled through her tears. "I told you, I'd wait no matter how long it takes." The sun slowly rose above the horizon, painting the sky in soft gold and crimson. The jungle, once a place of fear and silence, now shimmered with life. Tu Sam sat beside Lee, who was lying weakly on a cot inside the border rescue camp. His wounds had been cleaned, his fever finally broken. For the first time in weeks, he looked at peace. When his eyes fluttered open, the first thing he saw was her tired face, streaked with dirt and tears, yet more beautiful than ever. "Am I dreaming?" he murmured. Sam shook her head, smiling gently. "No, you're alive, Lee. You're safe now." He reached out, brushing her hand with trembling fingers. "You came all the way here for me." Her eyes glistened. "You once told me you'd cross any border for love. How could I do less?" For a long moment, they just sat there, the world outside fading into silence, leaving only the sound of their breathing. The soldiers nearby watched quietly, knowing they were witnessing something rare, love that had survived bullets, storms, and distance. That evening, when the rescue team prepared to leave for home, Lee struggled to his feet. With Sam's help, He stood under the fading light of the sunset. The horizon stretched endlessly before them. The same border that had once separated them now glowed like a bridge of light. He turned to her and whispered, "When I thought I was dying, I prayed to see you again. You were my reason to survive." Sam held his face in her hands, tears falling. "And you were my reason to be brave." Their lips met, soft, trembling, full of everything they couldn't say. Around them, the wind carried the scent of rain and earth, and for the first time, both felt truly home. No longer a soldier and a beggar girl, just Ly and Sam, two souls who had crossed every border for love.